23 days after the abrogation of Article 370 and the bifurcation of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories, a five-judge constitutional bench, it has been decided by the Supreme Court, will hear all pleas challenging the order. These will begin, of course, in the first week of October. Separately, petitions challenging the communication lockdown in the valley will be taken up in the next 7 days. Now, while the legal process will take its own course, we are placing now before you some of the arguments you may hear over the next few weeks. Joining us today is Tehseen Poonawala, petitioner in the case questioning the communication blockade. I'm also joined by Aishwarya Bhati, Supreme Court advocate, who will present the opposing view in this face-off. Welcome to both of you and thank you for joining us. Tehseen, let me begin, and I know your petition is about the communication blockade, but I just want to start with a bit about the constitutional validity, because that is one part of the argument as well, and where your views really stand on that. There's a clutch of petitions which a constitutional bench will hear from October onwards. What do you think is the primary argument for questioning the constitutional validity of the move?
Tamana, thank you so much for having me on your show. There are two principal points in the constitutional validity, though I must preface with one point that I do support the watering down of Article 370, and it is something the Honorable Prime Minister has promised and he delivered. However, I do think there is a legal lacuna here, and the lacuna is as follows. This has been done by taking consent from the governor, who has acted as a state assembly. Now, as we all know that the governor acts on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, as well as the president who acts on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, as this precedent's rule there. So the central government has advised itself to abrogate or water down Article 370, and the governor, acting on the advice of the president who acts on the advice of the central government, has done that. So can the governor take over powers of a state government, and can parliament function this role of a state government, is one part. The second part, which I think is a larger part that is very, very interesting, is the watering down of federalism. Today this has happened in Jammu and Kashmir. Tomorrow it could happen in any other state. A state could be reduced to a union territory. Is that in a federal structure allowed? Because the federal structure is what is described as the basic structure of our constitution. India is a union of states. Can that be allowed? That is something that also will come up for questioning.
Okay, Aishwarya, your response to those two basic points, because this has been done effectively through a president's order which replaced the constituent assembly with the state government, which could also mean the governor of Jammu and Kashmir. That in this case has been nominated by the central government. What is the legal argument for the validity of this move constitutionally?
Well, we'll hear the arguments in October now that it's nominated, but my perspective on this is, that the J&K constitution itself prescribes that in the absence of the assembly being there, which is instances where presidential rule is in place, in such cases consultation with governor is what is mandated for all circumstances and not just for that. So that is the provision in the J&K constitution itself, and this is not the first time that presidential orders have been issued with respect to Article 370 during a period where the assembly was not there and with consultation with the governor. So the precedent clearly allows this, the J&K constitution allows it. That is as far as the first aspect is concerned. The second aspect that Tehseen spoke about was the issue of abrogating or watering down 370 by I think the process. I couldn't hear him very clearly for some time, but I think the process itself is something of an issue here. So the process is something that the Indian constitution prescribes for, and the consultation is prescribed in the J&K constitution. So it will be interesting to see. In any case, see, one thing that I wanted to make a point was, I think to say that reducing a state to union territory, I don't think when a state becomes a union territory or your union territory becomes a state, I don't think it's reducing something to something. ultimately, I think for what matters for the people
No, the
of that
powers of
area
the
is
government
how
are
well they are
reduced.
governed, how well
Actually,
they
the
are
powers of the
administered.
government in a union territory are reduced versus a state. I mean, we've seen examples of that in Delhi itself.
Yes, so this is a unique situation that we are dealing with, that it's probably not happened before, that the state has gotten converted into a union territory, but we have to understand that from the point of view of the population, that we have some union territories where people are absolutely vying to live. I mean, Chandigarh is one such example.
Okay.
So it's about the administration and management of it, and I don't think it dilutes federalism in any way if
Tehseen has a quick
the
rebuttal.
people,
Yes.
the electorate of that place.
Yes, yes, Tehseen.
Aishwarya ji is right in saying that this has never happened, that a state has been downgraded to union territory. The problem with this is the basic structure of our constitution. Forget the basic structure. Our country is known as the Democratic Republic of India, which is a union of states. India is a union of states. It's not a union of union territories. States have come together to form a union called India. How can then that state, which has come into India with a certain agreement, be downgraded to become a territory which is not a state and a union territory? That has never happened. Therefore, the Supreme Court has said in a number of judgments that the federalism is a basic structure. Now, how can you attack the basic structure? Because the basic structure of our constitution can never be changed.
Okay, let me come to the next, part of the conversation around Jammu and Kashmir. One is, of course, and it's in the Supreme Court, the validity of the whole move itself, and it will go through its legal processes, the challenges, etc. Obviously, the Supreme Court is in no hurry to find any kind of solution to this or rush through a decision on this, which is why time has been given. A constitutional bench will look at it. But let me come to part two. Now, it's been about 20 to 23 days since the decision was made, and Tehseen, you have argued, and your petition argues, that there shouldn't be a communication blockade in Jammu and Kashmir. Earlier today, we heard from J&K Governor Satyapal Malik explaining why it's important to have that communication blockade in place and how it's being eased, in stages. In fact, let me just play out for you what the governor said earlier this evening before we move ahead.
मैं सबसे निवेदन करना चाहता हूं हाथ जोड़ के कि ये दिक्कतें पहले भी थी जब टेलीफोन नहीं था। 10-20 दिन इन दिक्कतों को आप भुगत लें। हमारे लिए एक भी कश्मीरी भाई की जान महत्वपूर्ण है। हम नहीं चाहते कि एक भी आदमी की जान हमारे हिस्से लगे। सब इलाज के लिए सारी सुविधाएं उपलब्ध हैं। 111 में से 81 पुलिस स्टेशंस ने रिलैक्सेशन हो गया है टाइम का। लैंडलाइन वाला ज्यादातर जगहों में खुल गया है, और ये जो हमारा मोबाइल है, इसको जैसे जैसे परिस्थिति सुधरती रहेगी हम ये लोगों का खोलते रहेंगे। इंटरनेट अलबत्ता हम शायद थोड़ी देर से खोलें।
Okay, so apart from promising those 50,000 jobs, he also spoke about how important that blockade really is in the current situation. Now, Tehseen, apart from the legal process, which will of course follow, this is a highly debated and a topic which creates many different kind of views. Tell us why you think that even in the current situation, and knowing that the situation is fragile, you think the communication blockade should be completely lifted.
Ma'am, because in the Honorable Supreme Court Keshav Nanda Bharti judgment, the Honorable Supreme Court declared that Article 21 of our Constitution, which is the mother of all constitutional rights given to us, that is the right to life and liberty, can never be even temporarily suspended, no matter what happens. Now imagine a situation, I want through you, your viewers, to imagine a situation that somebody wants to call an ambulance or a fire brigade. If even landlines do not work, how do you call a fire brigade or an ambulance? I'm not even asking for mobile phones or internet. I understand that may spread rumors, but at least basic landlines within the state and just outside the state, not even international calls. Point number two, we've seen several reports of medical emergencies, medical shortages, a pregnant woman not being able to reach the hospital. Our armed forces will help them, but how do you reach the hospital? How do you contact a doctor? How do you ask for medicine? Third, the losses in business. This is prime season for Apple. This is prime season for other businesses, which is including wood. How do you do business without any sort of communication? How do you do e-business that our Honorable Prime Minister promotes so much without an OTP be generated? So ma'am, at the end of the day, if we are doing these for the people of Kashmir, we say that this is great for the people of Kashmir, should they not be a part of this?
Okay.
Everybody else is celebrating, which is great. Why are they not a part
What's
of
the
this?
counter?
Just because a handful of people are holding the Union of India to ransom?
What's the counter, Aishwarya? What's the counter? Why a lockdown on freedom of expression? And that too for so many days. Honestly, in this day and age, none of us can imagine being, cut off from communication for that long. There are some reports that it's hampering medical services as well.
Well, you are right. There are human stories there, and they are being attended to. There are counter stories also coming like that. But essentially, we have to understand that the situation in Kashmir is not an ordinary fragile situation of a law and order problem. Here is a territory where a proxy war is being fought by extremist terrorists from across borders. And it has been so for several years now. We are all aware Armed Forces Special Powers Act was in place in many areas of that, and you don't have your defense forces taking care of usual law and order issues. It's only when the situations are extremely alarming and there is an external input in the form of a proxy war situation. So that being the position, we also have to appreciate that law and order situation is something that depends on place to place, phase to phase. Under the Criminal Procedure Code, even the district magistrate of a place has the powers to assess the situation, and on the basis of his assessment, there are embargoes which are placed on different things, but in a phased manner. It is being attended to. It's not like that, and we have heard in Tehseen ji's petition itself, we heard the government inform the Supreme Court that review is happening on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, and the situation is being looked at in a phased manner from area to area. So it's not a one-size-fit-all solution. Neither can it be. It is a very important, it's a very serious issue. We can't trivialize it by saying that Article 21 is being taken away. Nobody is taking away Article 21. That is very deeply embedded in our Constitution, and it remains so. But there is an extraordinary situation, and mechanisms have to be put in place so that that extraordinary situation can be tackled properly.
Tehseen, that actually is at the crux of the entire debate, and while it's galling to think of, an entire populace locked out from communication. There seems to be no way to really justify it. But the fact is, and that's something that the governor said as well, that wide-scale casualties and violence has not taken place. And the communication blockade is responsible for it in some part. In fact, he did give out, and we'll put out the quotes for you, he did give out statistics talking about how there have been no casualties as opposed to situations in 2010, etc. How would a government deal with the situation without clamping down on some communication?
I am not saying all communication should be allowed, but I am asking for basic landline services within the Union of India, not even international calls. How do you call an ambulance? But I want to make a larger point, and 2 points. On 8 November 2016 at 8 p.m, our Honorable Prime Minister told all of us, including you, Tamanna, me and Aishwarya ji, that suffer for 50 days terrorism would be over. He said that 11 times. Today the Prime Minister has saying the same thing, that there is terrorism in Kashmir. Should we not ask questions of our Honorable Prime Minister and our government that what happened to the earlier promise and the earlier suffering that we had, that today there is a new batch of suffering for a new batch of people? Point number 2, Aishwarya ji is right when she says the Honorable Attorney General and SG in the court said this on my petition. That was the only thing that they said on my petition. Otherwise, they made personal remarks on me. But the larger point that needs to be asked is this, Tamanna. At the end of the day, if the people of if Article 370 is abrogated, which it is, or watered down, and now the Constitution of India, our Constitution, applies completely on the state of Jammu and Kashmir, then our Constitution gives you and I the same liberty that must be given to the people of Kashmir. For example, if somebody wants to protest peacefully, it's a fundamental right. Why would you not allow somebody to protest peacefully? Why are mainstream political leaders locked up?
Absolutely.
Chief ministers are locked up, ex-chief ministers.
No,
Why?
absolutely, Tehseen. Absolutely, Tehseen. And here, in this debate, my role is to get all sides, so I will always play the devil's advocate. So absolutely, it is galling to think why elected chief ministers, etc. locked up. But how else? What is the alternative if a government were to do this? Suppose you were to do this tomorrow and you said you support the abrogation of 370, or asking about the how and why. If you were to do this tomorrow, Tehseen, and I put that question to you, would you have been okay with complete movement
Yes,
of
ma'am.
leaders, with complete open communication, knowing the history of how quickly violence
Yes, ma'am.
escalates in this area? What else would you have done?
I take your good wishes, ma'am, that I will soon be the Home Minister of
No,
this
no.
country. This country
That's
does
all I'm
deserve
saying.
a good
It's a
Home Minister.
hypothetical,
But
but
the
yeah.
larger question, it's not the first time, ma'am, a state has been divided.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope it turns true, but this is not the, what is not hypothetical, ma'am, is in the past in our country, states have been divided. If states have been divided in the past, they've been based on the consensus of the will of the people. Ultimately, ma'am, we are a democracy and the will of the people is supreme. If the Jammu and Kashmir governor says that the people of Kashmir are absolutely happy, a majority of them, and I've heard numbers like 85%, 90%, without any statistics, they've quoted these numbers. I take them by their word. If 90% of the population are happy, in a population of 80 lakhs, why are we scared of, why is the Union of India, which comprises of 130 crore people, scared of a few people? What can they do? At the end of the day, we are such a mighty country. We shouldn't be scared of a few people. And lastly, what would I do? I would consult everybody. I just want to end by one question. I'm not talking about Mehbooba Mufti. I'm not talking about Farooq Abdullah Saab. I'm talking about Omar Abdullah. Tell me one statement Omar Abdullah made that deserves him to be locked up and away from his family. One statement. In fact, on the day he was locked up, he tweeted there must be peace. Why is Omar Abdullah locked up? Can we justify it?
Aishwarya, you must respond.
I can't answer that, Tamanna, but I will just share my perspective on some of the thoughts that Tehseen ji has shared. You know, I wish we had such a situation that Tehseen ji is speaking about, and mighty country that we are able to deal with everything. Unfortunately, terrorism does not work that way. Unfortunately, terrorism and these extremists, they attack innocent people, vulnerable people in extremely different circumstances. So, you know, we have seen, let me tell you by example, Article 35A petitions have been pending in Supreme Court for a long time. Article 35A was challenged. Now, of course, that whole thing has become a moot question. But every time there was a date for that Article 35A petitions, those bunch of petitions to come up, the week preceding that, days and week preceding that would be full of violence. There would be encounters. Our security forces would be hauled up. There would be counter, terrorism fighting, etc. Lives were being lost. There was stone pelting, the innocent children, innocent civilians. If you look at the casualties, the people that we have lost, and I'm not talking about the wars, the 3 wars that we have fought in that area and Kargil. Even in the peacetime, the number of lives that we have lost, 70,000 is the lives of security personnel, apart from the war times, and the lives of innocent Kashmiris also is at a very high pedestal.
Yeah.
It's a very peculiar situation. It's not like other states getting bifurcated. It's not like one Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, that kind of a division. So you are not right in comparing these 2 different states, because they're not, you're like comparing chalk and cheese.
Yeah,
the comparison is
I
not
must say
right. It's
the-
not taking away rights of the
The
citizens.
division of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh was not by any means, without protests from various citizen groups. Things became pretty violent in the lead up as well. So I would just point that out. But we've heard.
There is no problem with the protests, Tamanna.
Yeah.
There's really no problem with the protests. Protests are fine, but here you're not dealing with citizens here. You're dealing in a proxy war situation.
Okay. Tehseen, just a response to the proxy war situation before I wrap up.
Well, the fact of the matter is we cannot be taking decisions on our internal matters based on what another country might think. If we are dealing with terrorism and proxy war, I go back to the earlier point. The Prime Minister promised us suffering to end proxy wars and terrorism. Why is he not answerable for that? You cannot keep shifting the goalpost. And to the point on Telangana movement was a violent movement. Nobody camped down on the liberty of the people of Telangana. In fact, that was encouraged. A peaceful demonstration against the Supreme Court order was the Jallikattu. Nobody clamped down on their liberty. Liberty must be fundamental. That's Article 21. How can we clamp down on liberty? Our constitution must be equal for anybody and everybody. That is the basis of a great nation, and we are a great nation.
All right, absolutely. There, I think I agree with you, and so will Aishwarya and everyone watching. We are a great nation.
So
we
do
have
I.
to walk the talk.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya, Bhati, and Tehseen, Poonawala. You're going to hear a lot of these arguments over the weeks to come. We've given you a small sample of the various views which come forward on the situation and the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. We've won the global perception fight. It's passed through Parliament, and whether it's constitution or not will be talked about. The human rights angle is where India really needs to walk the talk and come out blazing ahead. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening.